All right, so first I want to start out by thanking the ETC, Accelerate Baltimore, and the ABLE Foundation for the opportunity to be part of Accelerate Baltimore. It's been a great experience, and for us it's fulfilled the purpose of getting from point A to point B. So I'm here to talk to you today about the Artichoke Mobile Client Management Solution, which helps independent professionals on the go do more earning and less churning. We're talking about a group of about 20 million people in the United States that are freelance or self-employed that are going to make up 40% of the workforce by the year 2017. A variety of different occupations fall underneath the umbrella that we're focused on within that group. People like hairstylists, massage therapists, trainers, photographers, couriers, home cleaning services. Picture professions that are service-based professions that deal with and need to manage a client base but do not sit in front of a computer. In fact, every moment they're in front of a computer, they are not earning an income. So this user faces three common challenges. One, they don't have reliable access to a computer. They have very little time in between serving clients, and they do not have any staff, no administrative support, no front desk, no back office, but they still need to manage client base. And we've conducted dozens of interviews with these service providers and found, believe it or not, that although nearly 100% of them are carrying a smartphone, the latest smartphone in their pocket, they're using pen and paper to manage their client base. We believe that this is about a $1 billion market opportunity that is virtually untouched. When people ask about other software solutions like CRM, those have not addressed the needs of this user, and these users are not using those solutions. When we've interviewed the users, we've heard a variety of things that have helped drive our product development efforts. This is just a couple examples. I spend several weekends tallying my receipts at the end of the year so that I can get ready for tax time. Literally a shoebox full of receipts. I keep my client notes on note cards. It's not the best system because if I lose the cards, I lose everything. This was a hairstylist right here in Baltimore. No-shows cost me money, but there's not enough time to remind every client. This was a trainer. Speaking to the challenges of being self-employed and managing a client base. So how does this manifest itself? The day's going on, I'm seeing my clients one after the other, little snippets of time in between, all the other stuff is piling up. So that leaves nights and weekends as fair game, or I just don't get it done. And the service level to my clients goes down, I can't grow my business, or I'm just not efficient and as profitable as I could be. Another small example here, and this is just one snippet, is no-shows. We get reports between 2 and 10 no-shows per month. Okay, at an average session value, let's say of $60. It could be anything, but it could be $150, but let's pick 60 as a rough number. That means you're losing between $3,000 and $7,000 a year in unrealized revenue just from no-shows alone. So what we're talking about is doing to client management for this user what QuickBooks has kind of done for accounting, which make it easy and accessible. The Artichoke product is easy, it's affordable, it solves specific problems that this particular user group has, and it's mission critical because it's everything related to their client and their income and how they're managing. And oh, by the way, it's 100% mobile. It's a responsive web application. So the core features are appointment reminders that help your clients stay on track, scheduling and check-in that helps you manage balances, client progress notes, believe it or not, probably the #1 thing that the users have been telling us that they're extremely focused on is a better way to keep and track notes. Stored billing information for one-touch payment processing. The ability to track payments, whether you receive them as checks or cash, you still need to track them and be able to report them for tax time. And referral automation. This is as simple as reaching out to your client base on an appropriate interval and asking for their referrals. Things that you know you want to do, you just don't have time to do them. Bottom line is less administrative time and better communication mean more earning and less churning for this user. The pricing model is extremely simple, which is, by the way, what everything about this product needs to be because this user doesn't have a lot of time to figure stuff out. It's a SaaS model, subscription-based model, where you'd get 60 days, maybe more, for free. We're going to find out what works. But you can't be 7 days. They'll never touch it. They need 60, 90 days to play with it and get a few clients in the system. And then they graduate to what we call the single-user subscription price, which covers all the features. There's no nickel and dime, add a few features, pay a few more dollars. And then later on, there'd be a multi-user feature where you could have multiple service providers on a single account. In the example where, say, maybe one massage therapist is managing 3 others, like in a miniature business that they've created. So if you want to think about the value proposition here, if you have just 1 no-show less per month, you pay for it twice. If you have just 1 additional referral per year, you pay for this thing easily. Just 1 less administrative day per month, once again, easily pays for it. By the way, just 1 hour less of administrative time per month that becomes a billable hour pays for the entire subscription price. And we're thinking about $30 or $29 a month for the single user. So this whole thing started about 6 years ago, and we developed an in-house tracking solution for tracking personal training payments and sessions at 2 health clubs that we own. And since then, we've used it with dozens of trainers and hundreds of clients and recorded thousands of sessions. But it really opened our eyes to the need for this on a much broader scale, with the twist being for the independent self-employed service providers out there that are not working in facilities or not working as employees. So the trick is, how do you reach these folks? What are the channels? Well, because it's an occupational specific target, you can reach them in many really efficient ways. They all tend to need accreditation and continuing education, and there's organizations providing that. There are trade-specific publications you can go to for editorial placements. Of course, 65% of people still find things on the web through natural search, so your website has to be good. Trade associations, social media discussion groups, hundreds of thousands of people in these occupations participating in social media discussion groups that are occupation-focused. Main influencers for these occupations. There's always 1 or 2, whether they're bloggers or writers. And then your existing subscribers. They're probably your best advocates, because every trainer knows a hairstylist, knows a massage therapist. It's not siloed so that they're only going to talk to other trainers. So really, what we need to do as the next step is we're going to test and refine our assumptions through a variety of tactics that include search engine optimization, believe it or not, old school direct mail. You don't see that on a technology slide very often. Web advertising, social groups, endorsements, editorial placements, and referrals. And then hone in on the ones that work the best. So really the competitive advantage here is we're an early entrant into this market, which is basically wide open. There's a very high switching cost for the user, because once they start putting a few clients in and processing some payments or recording payments, there's really not as much desire to change to another system. We are a fully functioning mobile web application, which means it's going to work on any device. There's no training required. It's a highly intuitive interface. There's no complex merchant accounts to navigate. If you choose the payment processing option, it's a simple process to sign up. We're a cross-occupational feature set, which means we don't have to come up with 12 versions of this product to make it scale. And we have a very simple fee structure, which is not the case with some competitive products. So in summary, there are really no established solutions in a market that we estimate to be $1 billion. The users are seeking specific solutions to their problems. Mobile penetration is reaching 75%, which means for the first time ever, this type of user can have this type of solution, and they're familiar with this interface and how to use it. There are very efficient marketing channels because it's occupational based, and the market size actually supports several offerings. So the fear that, well, what if somebody enters, or 2 or 3 people enter the market? There's room for several players, so it's not a game over situation. So what we're looking for is a $500,000 convertible note, of which $300,000 would be used for native app development. As I mentioned, we're a responsive web application. We think the next layer, after we kind of play with some marketing tactics, is going to native application. $150K for marketing, which is probably the money some of that we'd spend before we spent money on the native application development, and $50K for support. As you get more subscribers, somebody needs to support those needs. We've set up a robust platform to do that, but you'll still need some good resources to deal with that. So giving you kind of a timeline on our milestones back in 2009 till current, in 2009 we launched the tool. Last year in July we formed Artichoke to take it to the next level. We were selected as an Accelerate finalist. We have our beta launch planned for June, and we're on track to do so. In August, we're looking to do kind of an official market launch. September, we're hoping to be established as some type of a member benefit to some large trade groups to help us access a lot of members really quickly. In October, we're hoping to close our first round note. November, looking to do a top 3 markets blitz. We can easily find out top 3 occupational markets by Bureau of Labor Statistics. without spending any money on that. And January, launched a native app on iOS and Android, and then in February, do a top 10 market blitz. So a very kind of methodical progression towards discovering the best channels and investing in the best channels. What we're talking about from a financial perspective is nearly a $9 million top line by 2017. Because it's a software product, the bottom line tends to look pretty good as well. You're looking at operating earnings of $7.5 million. We think that we can run this business very efficiently and very lean, especially once you identify the best marketing channels and focus on those. So thanks for the time. Appreciate the opportunity. We'll be at the table 694 in the corner. If you want to come by and take a test drive on the product, we'll have it there out on for demonstration. So that was a little less conversational than I was hoping, but I got in my mode.
That was excellent. That was excellent. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, sure. Let me pull up some notes here.
All right. Overall, I got it. I mean, in no particular order or degree of importance. Justin, you probably should have introduced yourself at the beginning.
Yeah.
And in that introduction should have been that you are a private businessman, health clubs, which kind of shows that I mean, you got there, but it shows right off the bat that you're someone in the know. Okay, I've lived, I've walked the walk. I know what I'm talking about. I thought that was good. I kind of got the big picture. The market seems absolutely there. Opportunity huge. Solution sounds like you've got one. It was a little, and because of the time constraint, because you only have 10 minutes and you're kind of rolling through the big picture rather than getting into details. I like the fact that you had done it in your world, in your healthcare world. But I guess I would have tried to give a little bit more example or comment on how it's working for people who are now using it, in your health club world. Just to show, yes, this isn't just a bunch of ideas. This is a practical thing we developed. And oh, by the way, there's a lot bigger picture we can apply it to. But I'd like to see a little bit more of the practical thing you developed. Not a lot, but just here's Joe, who we bring in as a part-time trainer, and he does this, and here's what he's able to do. Boom, 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 boom. You touched on it in general terms, but I think more specific would have been good when you have time, when you have a longer time frame for your presentation. You said a couple of things that I didn't understand. One, CRM. You said something. Oh yeah, that's not a CRM. I have no idea what a CRM is. All right.
I swore I wasn't going to use that acronym, and that's another reason not to use it.
Yeah. So I take that for what it's worth. You said one of your bullet points toward the end was no training required. It's all intuitive. I kind of went, I don't know. You're going to have to. Whenever I hear it has something to do with a computer, laptop, PC, and I hear no training required, I just think from time, people are going to need something to get them rolling, or some people are more computer friendly or literate than others, and I don't know, because I think people are going to need help somewhere in some corner of the software. So, anyway, that was my gut reaction. Competitors, it seems like you're the first in this market on an individual basis, and you assume there'll be competitors following, which is probably accurate. But your comeback was excellent. You said that it's a huge market. I mean, I can have competitors, and we're still rolling. So you've got the advantage of being first. Usually, you want to give a little bit more deference to your competitors to show what they do to differentiate your product. And maybe you can do that, maybe you can as a practical matter. But I thought your overall response to that was good. And to me, it's very strong. Really, one of your real strength here is that you've actually developed this in some format, some kind of beta format. And oh, by the way, I've got people who are using it, and it's working. That's to me, that was huge. So good job. I mean, really overall, good job.
Thanks. I think I got all the feedback. One question on OneNote, just so I can
Sure.
make the modification in the presentation. Where is it? I think it was about the competitors. So,
Well, what I'm thinking about competitors, if you have specific competitors that you can point to and differentiate your product, that's good. But maybe you don't have competitors. Maybe the fact that because of your unique situation, you're really the first out there, or
right.
the first you know about out there. Then I'd say it. I mean, as far as I know, we're the first out there. You know, we look around for competitors, don't have it. All right, we think that they'll be coming, but my God, it's a huge market. So, you know, we're the first. We're the first in a huge market. We plan to take advantage of that position. That's a good answer.
There are a couple of new entrants. If you really want to get to like the fine detail of someone doing kind of specifically what we're doing, the user, there's a new entrant in March that I can reference, and then I think I'll make general reference to the fact that there are other companies that have products that do this and 50 times more features serving brick and mortar, but that product is too and so here's someone that's actually come in that's going to be doing something similar, and here's how they're funded and all that. And then here's the others that people tend to think is part of this, but the user doesn't.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's a good point. There needs to be a little more explanation to that.
I mean, you kind of glossed it over, but you know, if you are the first and there's no significant competitor out there, your perspective wasn't a bad one. But usually that's what I think. I think that's, if I was an investor, I would want to know who the competitors were. And that you had a handle on that.
I was second that. I think one strong, really strong point that you should emphasize, and you did emphasize it, but it's worth just making really clear, is the business about the stickiness of the product, especially if the primary interface is mobile. You know, people are not going to want to like figure out how to export their data out of your system into some other thing, assuming that your thing meets the fundamental, you know, minimum, product features that they're looking for. They're going to stick with you. So that's something that really works in your favor, and you know, means that if you can get somebody in the door for like the 60-day trial, you have a very good likelihood of keeping them forever if you maintain the product well. So I think that's extremely beneficial on your side. There's a couple sort of product points that I think are worth digging into a little bit more. One is, you built a web-based application so far, and that is a great strategy because it's so much easier to modify that and test it and whatnot than it is to start with like a native-only app. But I didn't get a sense of kind of how much work you've done to try to figure out how to really get feedback from users at scale. And I get that you probably have a handful of people using it presently. They're probably people that you have existing relationships with in other contexts because of the the fitness club context. But I think it's really important for you to find some arm's length users to start to get feedback from, because otherwise, you're going to very likely end up with kind of your people who are basically your friends telling you, hey, this is really cool, it solves my problem, which doesn't do you any good. What you need is people that are not your friends, and in fact, don't know you from Adam, who have this problem and are going to tell you, yeah, well, this will almost solve my problem, but here's how it sucks. And I would say make sure that you address that process in your presentation, because I didn't really get a sense as to how far you've gone down that road, and whether your feedback was basically friendly or potentially a little bit more neutral or even hostile. And hostile feedback is like what's going to turn a product into a product and not just be like fantasy.
Right.
And then, you know, the other thing I would say is just on the developing the iOS app, you know, I wouldn't rush to do that, only because the longer that you can stay in the sort of feedback gathering mode, the easier that'll be.
One platform to manage instead of 3.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, once you go down that road, you know, you're going to be having to then sync up the iOS app to whatever you're still doing on the web, so that, you know, people on Android and iOS are getting a comparable experience. So there are landmines in that domain, and I would encourage you to try to like avoid them, map them out, do whatever you can. The last piece on the iOS native app thing is, you know, how are you going to distribute that exactly? There was another pitch today that had the same basic problem where, you know, Apple, if you're going to be generating revenues off of the app, either you have to do it as an in-app purchase, or it has to be like completely separate from like whatever your payment portal is. They have to have signed up somewhere else and then like download the app or something. It's swirliness I'm worried about. So just make sure that you've totally figured out what the reality of that is. Not what you hope is true, but like what is actually true. And make sure you outline that. And I think just saying really briefly in the presentation, you know, the App Store rules are X, and this is what we are going to do to distribute it, and we've solved that problem. Because that way you'll allay the fears of anybody who's aware of kind of some of the App Store complexities. They'll make them think that you've considered this and have a solution in mind.
I think what I did in the financial model is, not that this is super relevant to my pitch, but just to the conversation we're having. I think what I did was we said after we launched the native app, at the top line to sales adjustments, that 30% that they take on the subscription fee, we assumed a certain percentage of our client base started to have to pay that after the point. I hope I did this in the spreadsheet after the point. Because if I say it in the spreadsheet, it's true, right?
Yeah, exactly. If it's on the spreadsheet, it must be gospel.
I think
the formulas are right. That's right.
Right. Come on, that's a lot of pressure, Neil.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, one way that you could, you could potentially find a way that they wouldn't have to pay that 30%, but there's a specific set of conditions that have to be met in order for that to even be close to true.
So we talked to some of the technology evangelists that used to be with Apple that were in charge of the development community, and to kind of vet this out way early in the process. I don't know how we got into this discussion, but essentially figured out it was either going to have to be a free application, and you'd still have to go to the website to get your registration, which, you know, there's a lot of those out there. Or if, in our model assumes the opposite, the worst case scenario, which is whoever's buying through the App Store is not going to our website, they're doing their full registration through the App Store, and 30% of that revenue is going.
And you have to decide which distribution model is going to work better for you. I mean, on the one hand, you could just do it entirely through the web, but then you're basically responsible for all of the distribution and getting people to go to that site and sign up there and understand that, like, oh, you know, it's an app, but you have to sign up on the web. Or you can outsource that job to Apple and pay them their 30%, and at least that's what it is today. Hope it does go up to 35 later, and you know, hope that they do a good job of that for you, which they may or may not. You know, so that's the fundamental choice, I think.
It's funny, you look at examples like Basecamp and people that have built these business productivity software solutions that similar to what we're doing in terms of category, and it's just recently that they've launched their own native application. It had been third-party developers providing native application plugins, but
because they have like an API that you can go to.
Yeah. On the your point about hearing more about the product that we'd already developed, and David, you also mentioned that. So we started kind of with a clean sheet of paper on this version of the product, because we knew it needed to go to mobile and it needed to have a lot more features than the one that we developed in-house. So one of the things I've been struggling with is in a presentation in an environment where you're talking to investment folks is to put a lot of emphasis on the fact we have actually built something that's being used, but also not be, and get people excited about that, but not be misleading about the fact that we actually used all that information to kind of start something all over from scratch with more, more stuff.
Interesting harm, and I think that's great. I mean, it shows that you're learning from your users, which is like the fundamental thing you have to do. The worst thing you could do is like sit in the back room by yourselves, decide what you think users are going to want, and then spend 2 years making it and roll it out. Users are like, I don't want this.
Right.
So I think being open about that process is a really good thing.
I wish we could pull up our interviews that we have in Basecamp from all the users we've talked to. These long narratives. You know, there's not 100 of them, but there's, 30 or 50, and there's these narratives that we write after we talk to them. And it was this thing about notes, like, you can take notes 1,000 ways, in this world on a smartphone, and yet it's the one thing that has risen to the top as being super important to the user, which we never would have known.
You might have a slide with 2 or 3 choice quotes, a sentence or 2 choice quotes, rather than, just to get those are good points you just made. And I would put user comments, or not user comments.
You got that up front. That's like the 3rd slide.
But maybe I can follow it up later in the presentation with, here are some specific
possibly
things that we linked back to those.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think it belongs later. I agree.
Okay.
It belongs later in the presentation. I think you could, because my mindset is at a different place later in the presentation. Then you get a couple of 2 or 3 meaty quotes up there that really kind of hammer it. Yeah.
I almost wonder if I could, tie it back and even show the little icon, not make it visually confusing, but so it feels real, like, oh, you actually did something with that feedback.
Right.
Or maybe, I was even thinking, maybe just profile one example. We found out this crazy thing about notes, and here's what the user told us. It's actually very easy to explain and very quick, and we can visualize it.
Yeah.
And hopefully it would leave anyone that cares about product development with the feeling like, oh, these guys have talked to some users, and they actually were surprised at what they found, and they acted on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And the only additional sort of concern that I would share would be that, however many you talk to, you didn't talk to enough.
Right.
Because there's always more. And again, getting outside of your friend circle is so key, because your people that are your social contacts, they're going to tell you one thing, but people that you don't know from anybody and who have nothing invested in your concept and you, whatever, they're going to give you the feedback that you really need most.
That's good feedback.
So you're right on 10 minutes, Justin. So if you add, you got to subtract somewhere else.
Okay.
Okay.
Was I really right at 10?
Right at 10.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Maybe 9:30 something.
There's a little stopwatch here, and I did not look at it one
it's right
time.
there.
That's good. No, you moved along at a good pace.
Yeah.
You moved along at a good pace.
No, I have one other question for you guys related to what we were just talking about. Product points, user quotes. One thing I wish they could do better in a 10-minute pitch is, so we're right at the crest of having like a live mobile user interface to show, and the website, the marketing platform set up. So there's a lot of these great visuals that are the things that people get really excited about, but it's really tough to build that into a pitch unless the format of the pitch is don't do a pitch at all, just show me the product, which like Tech Breakfast does.
Right.
Which is, there's a lot to be said, but that's not really the format we're going with here. Because then people are saying, yeah, that's really neat, but tell me about the market, and what's the point? That's one of the things I've struggled with. Is there a way to squeak that in? But I guess that's what the demo table is.
The demo table is a great place for that.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Great. I appreciate the feedback, guys.